Hi, my name's Adrian. I'm one of the team here at Vets Day Go Diversify. Welcome to Career Connections and Career Transitions. With the London Vet Show now just 2 weeks away, we're talking about common career transitions that people do from veterinary clinical practice into other jobs. One of the things that we get asked quite a bit is, what does it take to transition into the civil service, for example, APHA or DEFRA? And tonight we're joined by three lovely folks from APHA. We have Liz Nab, who's a Veterinary Investigation Officer. We have Kat Lum, who's a Senior Vet Inspector. And we have Sean Rowlands, the Veterinary Head of Careers and Education at APHA. Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Evening, Adrian.
Nice to see you. So I'm going to do a little round robin. We've got about half an hour of chat, and then we're going to open up the cameras, and you'll be more than welcome to come in and ask us questions. In the meantime, my colleague Mel is working the chat box. If you've got questions on Facebook, drop them into the comments. Or if you're in the room and you want me to ask as we go along, you can DM us directly. We can make it anonymous if you want us to. And we'll ask the questions as we go. So we'll kick off with Liz. Liz, very quickly, just introduce yourself for us.
Okay. I'm Liz, as you say. I am currently VIO. I'll be using that because it's a bit of a mouthful, Veterinary Investigation Officer. So I'm VIO at Starcross down near Exeter. I've been in that role full-time since January, having joined last June part-time. I was in practice for 16 years before I left in 2018 to do a PhD. And then there was a bit of crossover at the end of my PhD. So that's really my career path. I'm based in North Devon, where I was in practice for 15 of those 16 years. I started off in mixed practice, but I progressed fairly rapidly towards the farm side, and with various practice mergers and so on, I ended up in farm-only practice, working my way towards doing sheep, and I ended up doing sheep work for more than half the time. Offering a range of services to the sheep farmers around here.
Brilliant. So, Kat, I just need to help unmute you because we've got the.
I think I'm there.
There we go. So, Kat, introduce yourself for us.
Okay, so I'm Kat. I graduated from Liverpool University back in 2014, and I work as a senior veterinary inspector at APHA. So I'm based up in North Yorkshire, and sort of my brief history was that I went into farm practice directly after graduation, having done a master's in infectious disease control as an intercalation. And I did predominantly cattle and sheep work, mainly dairy cattle work whilst I was in practice, and then moved across to APHA as an SVI in 2019.
Okie dokie. And just last but by no means least, Sean, introduce yourself for us.
Thanks, Adrian. So I'm Sean Rowlands. I'm currently Veterinary Head of Careers and Education at APHA. Potted history, I've been graduated a long time. I think that's probably the best way of describing it without embarrassing myself with an age. And mixed practice, horses, travelling, returned, helped out with foot and mouth, still doing some clinical work up until, I think tomorrow is my last day. I'm doing a bit of early retirement of my clinical work and loving my job in APHA. That's probably as good a summary as anything.
Excellent. So what we're doing today is talking about career transitions. We've actually got three different career pathways evolving with this conversation today. There are some jobs from APHA coming down the line. If you keep an eye on Vets Day Go Diversify in the next week or so, and also on the Government Vet website, you'll find them as well. So we'll highlight those at a later date. I would like to start with Kat then. So, Kat, tell us what a senior veterinary inspector is and does.
So I suppose, can we call it an SVI first to save our tongues? So an SVI is sort of like the sort of feet on the ground field vets that APHA has. So we're out and about on farm. We're sort of like the first line responders to sort of notifications of notifiable disease, welfares, all that sort of thing. So the role is there primarily as people that are trained and know how to respond to these sorts of calls. We cover we have sort of a duty vet that's on call sort of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. However, I don't want that to put people off with the thought of it, lots and lots of on call. I think sort of as an on call sort of thing, our rotas come round, I don't know, every couple of months we would do a weekend. So the demand is nowhere near like what it is in practice. But yeah, so what our sort of baseline things are to do is that sort of out and about field vet roles. So it does involve an element of clinical work, like you would have had in practice. So you are examining individual animals at times. However, the sort of overriding purpose of the role is sort of that protection of the sort of national herd and flock from disease outbreaks and welfare concerns.
And so, given your background and what you do now, what brought on that transition? What took you from that clinical work and then into the APHA work?
I suppose my journey started quite a long time before I actually joined the APHA. So as I said previously, I did an integrated master's in infectious disease control when I was at uni. And part of that role involved doing a placement in industry. So I did mine with the TB policy advice team at APHA down in London at the time. And not to give my age away, but that happened to fall on the summer of 2012. So as you can imagine, the placement in London, summer of 2012, was a particularly exciting and good place to be. And I had a brilliant time, not just in London, but with the team itself. And I learned a lot. I had my eyes open to this world that I didn't really know existed prior to that. And I was really enthralled by it and was all set to start as a new graduate. And that's what I wanted to do. Went back to uni, started clinical rotations, and quite quickly realised I did actually quite enjoy clinical work. So I went into farm practice after qualification and, did that lived the James Herriot lifestyle quite literally in North Yorkshire for quite some time. And I really enjoyed that. I won't shy away from the fact that my clinical career was a good one. And I learned lots, had lots of good relationships with people and farmers. But I just found it got to the point of it became a little bit relentless, and I just didn't really feel I was being overly stretched by it anymore. I could, quite competently do dairy routines on my own, do cesareans. You stop thinking about the bacterial profile of calf pneumonia and that kind of thing, and you just use what's in the back of your car, don't you? And so I started to look for sort of other things to sort of, I don't know, sort my itchy feet a little bit, I suppose. And I got back in touch with the people who I'd done my placement with initially and started speaking to them. And I suppose a little bit about what the point of us being here today is, what did the jobs look like? What was the career like as a whole? And, how could I go about achieving that? And was it something that I would be sort of well suited to? And, I think I was very fortunate to have those people to talk to directly. And I appreciate that not many people would have been in that position. And it's partly why I get involved with these kind of things, to be able to help other people to have someone like that to talk to. So yeah, that's how I ended up here.
And so what was the biggest step for you in that transition? Were there any particular road bumps, or was it smooth, or what did you have to learn or do differently?
I think the application process is, different to sort of anything. I got a job. I had 2 interviews as a new graduate to 2 places I'd seen practice at before, and they were stretching the definition of a sort of interview, if you like. It was more come and have a cup of tea. So I think the sort of formal application process was very new to me. So that was something that took a little bit of getting your head round and, just properly understanding and that mindset actually that it's a much bigger organisation and things do take sort of longer to sort of process than necessarily in private practice. And then I suppose I think I was fortunate in the sense of I understood the organisation maybe a little bit more than people coming in sort of fresh from things. But it's a very different pace. So it did take a little bit of adjusting and sort of, I would go out and do 3 or 4 visits a day. And that was sort of as I would have done a run around. And it was well, no, just do things properly, slow down, just focus on one thing at a time, do it properly, get all your paperwork written up properly. And that side of things was very different to, how I'd been used to sort of working in practice and just bouncing from one job straight onto the next. And so I think that was probably the biggest transition thing that I wouldn't say struggled with necessarily. It's not exactly a bad thing to struggle with, but that was just very different to sort of switching my sort of way of working, I suppose.
And so people might be thinking, all right, okay, so that makes sense. What are the pros and cons of the job, though? Because every job has pros and cons. Yeah, how do you see that?
I mean, I think you'll struggle to find a job within the veterinary profession that is probably as varied as this. Like, you know, the work, I mean, I said briefly about sort of notifiable diseases and welfare concerns, but I mean, that is far from what this, you know, all of this role entails. We do all sorts of things. Most statutory, you know, disease requirements that involve a vet will be covered by an SBI at some point, I would suppose. You know, animal byproducts work, veterinary medicines work. You know, we provide all the licenses for agricultural shows and markets, inspect all the markets, that kind of thing. So it really is like very varied, which I think is a massive pro. It just exposes you to all these work areas. I mean, a lot of which that, you know, I thought I understood British agriculture pretty well, but there's a lot of things that I wasn't even aware of that are actually really interesting and really pivotal. So I suppose that's a massive pro with it. I think the career progression and the structure around that is something that was a massive driving force to why I sort of started with APHA, and, you know, something that you don't necessarily get in private practice or the veterinary careers necessarily. And, you know, the opportunities that come with this role and working for APHA generally. And I suppose the sort of pivotal one is sort of the flexibility that comes with it. There's no shying away from, you know, the fact that, you know, we work hard in this job, especially over the last few years. We've been through massive outbreaks, and, you know, people have worked exceptionally hard, but there is flexibility in this role to make it fit around, you know, your personal life and your other commitments. And, you know, you can get your visits done and then pick your kids up from school and then do your paperwork on an evening. And, you know, so it's had a really sort of positive effect on my sort of quality of life and personal life, I suppose. I've sugarcoated it now. So the cons is, you know, it is hard work and it is stressful. We, you know, especially during outbreaks, people work long hours. It is pretty grueling. It's not necessarily always the most pleasant jobs in the world that you're doing. And, you know, disposing of hundreds of thousands of turkeys and that kind of thing is out in the cold and the snow is hard work. And it can be stressful. It's, you know, there is no shying away from that either. It's, you know, it can be full on in your you know, you're having to deliver potentially very, very bad news to people, which, you know, is not easy at times. And so I think, you know, that's probably one of the hardest parts about it is, you know, that side of it.
Okay, wonderful. So we've got some questions coming in already, which we're going to kind of keep for a moment, because we're going from the field base into a lab base. So Liz, you're a VIO, Veterinary Investigation Officer.
Yeah.
Tell us about that job in contrast to the SVI job.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess the main contrast is we are in the lab most of the time, or the post-mortem room. We're spread across 6 sites in England and Wales. And there are currently about 4 full-time posts at each of those sites. So we're a small team, probably compared to the field teams. And we do a range of things. So most people in sort of farm practice will be aware that we provide a service for postmortems and disease diagnosis for their farm clients. So those are perhaps some of our main customers, but much like the field team, the national herd, or the taxpayer, if you like, are our other main customer. And our real role is surveillance as well. So not only are we looking for novel threats and diseases to the national herd and flock, but we're keeping an eye on endemic disease patterns and things like that. So antimicrobial resistance and so on. So yeah, we're lab-based, which means in a couple of the labs, and I'm fortunate enough to work in one of those, we work alongside scientists who do bacteriology in our site and PCR. So we get to see them, talk with them, and really collaborate sometimes when we're trying to get to the bottom of the problem. So that's really fun. Yeah, that's really it. So do you want a bit more detail about what we do in a day?
Yeah, Kat's told us about sort of gallivanting around the countryside, looking to the field and all of the animals within it and all of the clients there. So what's your average day in the life of look like?
Yeah, okay. So our average day or week, perhaps, because we tend to split our duties so that we're not primarily in the post-mortem room every day. But if we're on first duty, we will take phone calls and organise carcass collections. We triage to decide whether it's of value to have a carcass in. Most of the time it's fine and we say yes. So we organise all that. We perform the post-mortems, decide which tests to run on that. And then second duty, we receive quite a lot of postal samples because we're one of the main laboratories. So we help process those. Really, we're sense checking what we've been asked to do with those samples, and we put tests on. And then there's a lot of reporting involved. So any diagnostic tests have to be reported out by VIOs. So we have to go through and read the results, make sure they make sense, look for mistakes, and then quite often we'll decide to put some kind of comment or interpretation on that. So that does take up a lot of time. But we also collate all the data of the cases that we've seen, and we write them up in a report every month to send to the surveillance intelligence unit, who are a whole wing who analyse that data. And we also write a newsletter to give to our back to our local practice customers as well. So there's a lot of that. But there's lots of other bits and pieces, as much like Kat says. I mean, we even go out sometimes. Sometimes we decide to do a visit to a farm. Sometimes we will do a public health visit. So there are lots of other bits and pieces. And then there's meetings. I mean, today we have work at home days. I've been working at home today, catching up on reports, but I've been in meetings. I've taken calls from vets to give advice on reports I sent out today. I've been in a meeting with other stakeholders in the industry to talk about parasite resistance. We've done contingency exercises for things that might go wrong in the post-mortem room. So there's a real range.
So Liz, what was your path to it? At the beginning, you talked about GP work and then becoming progressively more specialised in sheep, and then your PhD. So what was your pathway and the transition into the APHA work?
Okay, so that was, a long period in practice where I'd say I did carve out a bit of a niche. I was interested in smallholder and sheep side of things from quite early on, probably 2006 onwards. But I was quite passive, and I went with the flow with what the business needed, if you like. So my job when I joined in my North Devon job in 2003 was completely different from when I left that job 15 years later. Certainly became busier and busier and busier. I enjoyed the work, but it was very full on, long days. And I always had this sort of interest in practice-based research and a desire to do it, but there was never the time to do it. And I didn't know how to either. And so I wasn't looking to leave or anything like that. But one day, by pure chance, I saw an advertisement for a PhD, and I instantly thought, do you know what? I really want to do that. And on the spot, I decided to find out if I could afford to do it, and apply for it. And I was awarded that position, and yes, so that happened. So not a lot of fault involved in that side of things, but no regrets.
And then the transition into APHA?
Yeah, so I did the VDS coaching course. I should give that a plug. I had always really enjoyed the relationship with Star-Cross VIOs. They were my heroes, my absolute heroes when I was in practice, because I'd be on the phone to them probably every week asking them for advice. And I kind of always fancied doing that job. But there isn't a huge turnover at Star-Cross, so I didn't imagine I'd really have that opportunity to work there, because I don't really like to move away from Devon. But again, by absolute luck, a part-time job role came up towards the end of my PhD. My supervisor said, yeah, it's quite feasible, you should apply for it. And I didn't actually get that one. It turns out there were two jobs, because two VIOs who job shared were both moving to higher grade jobs within APHA. freeing up 2 roles, and they said, you didn't get the first one, but there's a second job, so we'd like to offer you that. And my colleague decided to not fully retire but part retire, and we swapped jobs, so I'm now full time. So everything, it was luck, really. Everything's just fallen into place.
Yeah, Arnold Palmer used to say, the more I practice, the luckier I get. So you're putting it down to luck, but I'm suspecting you carved the pathway there as well.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of questions come through. Actually, Sean, I'm going to bring you in at this point. So Sean, you're head of veterinary talent at Government Veterinary Services and APHA, which means that you're building teams across the whole of the Government Veterinary Service. Is that right?
Predominantly APHA, but I do share best practice with employers across Government Veterinary Services. Yeah. So
one of the questions we've had is, does it reduce my chances that my clinical experience is all in one area or another? And in this case, the person asking the question said, I'm an equine vet. Would that harm my chances to get this kind of a job?
No, I mean, we're really fortunate, and I'd love to take some credit for handpicking Liz and Kat as talent in APHA, but I have no part to play in their incursion into APHA. It's just a success story for us. So no simple answer, and certainly I'm conscious some 18 months, 2 years ago, our application route was probably quite stuffy, long-winded, and would be a form of words that would put people off, and people would often sort of self-reject very early on. And the way the adverts were written, it tended to sort of sell itself just to individuals maybe who were in clinical practice, thinking particularly about the field roles, similarly in the VIO positions. But I think what we have identified is, certainly for our benefit in APHA, is by opening the net and actually saying, look, we can teach you some of this stuff. And Kat alluded to earlier, that sort of agricultural awareness, which of course people in practice, in mixed practice, will have more than maybe those from equine or small animal. We're thinking about cattle industry, etc. But we have the sort of support network to give training. So, and we are benefiting in APHA from having widened that net and having entrants coming in from, small animal sectors and from equine sectors, and still from the meat hygiene industry, and even from other roles that maybe weren't obvious to us before. So no simple answer. Certainly don't feel that you don't have some of the skills that may well be applicable.
Yeah, and there's 2 actually related questions. So the first question you kind of answered, which is, do I need further qualifications to actually get this kind of a job? And the answer is, yeah, probably not. Another question is, if I was going to get into APHA roles to do the Veterinary Investigation Officer, the VIO role is, what kind of entry point are they looking at? Is it straight in, or is there some other job they should be doing first? I'll put that to Liz.
Oh, I just missed the bit that's like...
Sorry, there was
the bit before.
Yeah, sorry. So question for you, Liz.
Yeah.
Somebody who's looking to get into APHA roles, like the lab, the VIO role, what's the entry point? Is it straight into that role, or would they do another role first?
If they were coming from practice or as a new graduate?
From practice.
No, straight in. Yeah, definitely.
Straight in. And for the SVI roles?
Yep. And no, there's a lot of learning on the job, but there's a lot of support from your colleague, from your colleagues within the lab. So I mean, I'm still learning loads and loads, but I suspect they think they've, I've made a huge improvement since I started. I've learned loads of things, but they don't expect you to just know the job. They support you fully. I mean, I really have felt supported since I started this job.
And Kat, just thinking about the continuing education, it's like there's a lot to learn on this kind of a job. There's a lot of regulatory stuff. There's a lot of statute. There's a whole bunch of process to learn as well. How many hours of CPD on average do you think you'd get in this kind of a role learning those things?
Well, I think just to sort of start, I'm trying to say, start from what Sean was saying before, and like to pick up on your point, it's so varied. And I came into this with very much a cattle background, yet spend most of my time now dealing with, a lot of my time now dealing with poultry work, and not something I really knew about before. Though I've often wondered when I'm filling in my CPD record, I could use them every day as you spend your entire life learning new things, and things that you weren't necessarily aware of before. And so in terms of continual education, it's every day is a learning curve. And I think within the field teams, we generally have someone that sort of specializes into each of the work areas. So there'll be sort of someone that's, they're specializing into like more into the like exotic notifiable diseases, someone into TB, someone into animal byproducts, that all those sorts of areas. And so there is the opportunity within your team to sort of, become that, and welfare, just want to become that sort of team lead if you want, and sit in these groups that will have someone from each of the sort of geographical field teams, where everybody then comes together to discuss cases, and then you'll be then responsible to feed back to the rest of your field team on that area. So it might be that you have a particular inkling for TB control, and so that you want to more, it doesn't mean that that's all you do, but it means that within the team that would be your area of particular expertise. And so there's endless opportunities to learn more about either a very broad variety of things, or to then sort of become a little bit more specialized in one area or another.
So very much a teamwork approach then, not unlike a multidisciplinary hospital. It's just that the department is spread across the different centres across the UK and home-based vets or SVIs as well. Liz, for you, there's a kind of follow-up question. So with all of this learning and with all of the opportunities, how far could an APHA career go? Where could you end up? What kind of roles are in the future, perhaps?
Oh goodness. Do you mind if I add to Kat before I even answer
go for
question?
It. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It's just reminded me of all the other things. And it's exactly the same for VIOs as it is for the field team, in that we sit on species expert group, and we start to have our own interests. And it is a real teamwork approach. But even to go a bit further, I've been doing training for the field team because of my interest in sheep lameness and my PhD. It's not, my VIO job doesn't really involve lameness much as time, but I've found that I can give something to the field team. So that's another thing and there's that flexibility to do it. In terms of career pathways, that there are so many different areas where you could go to, and some people sort of move into more sideways, perhaps into other jobs. They might well move between VIO, field team to VIO, or they might go into the next notch of the ladder, if you like. But I mean, I haven't even got my head around all the things that the two VIOs that I mentioned, who me and another colleague replaced, one of them moved to SIU and became more specialist herself, and then another one moved into the epidemiology side. So that's just to name a couple of examples. There are management roles, there are more clinical roles. You go into welfare. It's just I don't have a handle on just how many roles there are. I think there's a Sean
yeah, absolutely.
Maybe.
There's it's very difficult to bring them to life, because I know previously, and Liz and Kat are doing a fantastic example, probably better than me, of bringing their roles to life. But the other roles that sit behind there, it's a rabbit warren, and you can really extend as far as you want. So within APHA, you mentioned there's the sort of managerial side, there's the specialism, so you can go into a sort of veterinary advisor, and both Liz and Kat have referenced that sort of support network. So if you're looking at seniority, you'll have vets in that sort of advisor role, supporting the likes of Kat in the field with certain decisions, complex cases, etc. You'll have some in a policy-facing role, so influencing future policy, potentially future legislation. You'll have some in trade teams who may well be having some very late nights discussing trade with colleagues in Asia, etc. So for some, that's really stimulating. You'll have others then, like myself, having a unique opportunity to look at talent and across the board, which I'm really grateful. You've got a veterinary director who's, obviously director level within government. The 3 CVOs currently, and Christian Glossop, Wales's previous CVO, have all had time in APHA and its predecessors, and all have cited, how useful that was as a base and that sort of fundamental learning and understanding. I always hate seeing talent leave APHA, but when I do, I'm always glad that they've gone across into other government veterinary roles, whether it's VMD, whether it's in FSA or FSS, etc. And there are a number of other roles and even some that have gone abroad into, previously OIE or WARHA as it is now. So all citing APHA as a fantastic sort of, starting position for them.
So sometimes those more senior roles come up, like, for example, the Chief Veterinary Officer, Christine Middlemas's job would have been advertised nationally and internationally as well. But, in terms of getting into those more senior roles, the APHA is a good starting point, would you say, Sean?
Yeah, and that probably is not doing a service to those individuals who stayed in APHAs, whether field roles or other roles, and continue to add tremendous value and become almost specialists in their sort of field. But those who wish and are eyeing up CVO roles, certainly getting a fundamental understanding of agriculture on a huge scale, on industry, on trade, on the economy and its influence on the way the government and veterinary professional services are deployed, are a fantastic sort of base for you for understanding how those CVOs operate. And I know there's a deputy CVO post that's just closed recently, and I know that the ask for that job, having had a job in APHA or a job somewhere else in GVS in the government veterinary family, will be an excellent sort of starting point for them.
Great stuff. So one of the questions that we've had actually from in several different ways is, when you look at government veterinary jobs compared to average practice jobs, getting a handle on what the remuneration package looks like, Sean, can be quite difficult, because there's a lot more elements to a government job in terms of where the remuneration comes from, isn't there? So, in some respects, the salary isn't the whole story. What other elements come into the remuneration packages?
Yeah, and it's often overlooked, isn't it, really? And I know a lot of people do focus on salary, and why wouldn't you in the current climate? It certainly features higher. But I think what history tells us, and I know some of the research that you and your colleagues have done at VSGD, is it isn't just the driver for lots of other people. And we don't always do a very good job of saying some of the other stuff. Kat's referenced some of it, and Liz likewise. So that's around the flexibility. Whether it's an opportunity to do part-time compressed hours, which I do, which affords me mornings to do some clinical work, so some people still want to do that. Whether it's the pension. Now, I know there may be many people on this call where pension doesn't feature very high, but if you look at or ask your employer tomorrow morning what their pension contributions from the employer is going to be, it's going to be normally less than 10% and usually far lower than that. It generally in government and certainly in APHA roles is around the 25-27% employee contributions, which is huge and sizable. And then you've got opportunities for some applying for postgrad learning. So we offer PhDs and masters and diplomas and certs, etc. And then so this concept of flexi hours. So I know in the clinical sector it has improved, and I've seen that certainly in my time as well. But where you are doing extra hours, you record those extra hours and you can claim them back as flexi time, etc. Hoping that gives opportunities for individuals for whatever reason. They can adjust their schedules, get their work done, get their reports in and their paperwork done, but then they can afford that time then back once it's recorded. So there's lots of other stuff. There's some in-year rewards. One thing that's probably really useful we are constrained sometimes in what we can specifically put in an advert, and it frustrates me as much as it frustrates others. But one of the things to make absolutely clear is that there's now a specialist pay allowance that we have for SCO, so the SVI and VIO roles. So there's that additional £3,000 at entry, and then a competency assessment, which staff are eligible for after their first 12 months, which then can have additional payments related to competency up to an additional amount.
So the salary is just the first layer of the cake. I mean, 25% pension contribution is huge. That's one of the benefits of government. And I think really only university pensions get close to that. There's not many private pensions or big companies that are paying at that level. So, just to come back to you for a second, Kat, you've just come back from mat leave as well, if I'm right in saying that. You've just come back?
Yeah.
And you were saying you'd had a fun time. We're shoehorning the trip in. Tell us about the trip.
I used my maternity leave very wisely, and I had nearly a month sort of road tripping around Canada with my little baby. So we bundled her on a flight in Gatwick and off we went for a month. So, but yeah, just to draw that in, the maternity leave policy and, that kind of thing is a civil service wide policy. So compared to, what a lot of people get offered in practice, it is, substantial.
Pretty significant. Yeah. Right. Believe it or not, we've been going for nearly 40 minutes. So we've got a few little questions to answer, which we'll do publicly. And then what we'll do is we'll close down the live stream. And if you want to join us in the Zoom room, Mel's going to put the invite into the comments if you can, Mel. What we'll do is flash up the London Vet Show QR code again. Just to answer a few of these quick questions then, let me just have a quick read. What would you say to a vet who wants to go non-clinical, Liz, as you know, this kind of career transition as an opportunity?
What do they mean by non-clinical, I wonder?
That's a great question.
Because I consider it a clinical role. My animals might be dead most of the time when I get to them, but to me, this is clinical. I think clinically,
it's not being in clinical practice as such.
So what was the question again?
Any advice to a vet who wants to go non-clinical? And I'm thinking that means practice.
Yeah. Okay. For this role.
Yeah.
Go for it. That's my advice, is go for it. That's quite a broad question. I guess I'm going to have to plug the coaching because what I did find it really useful. So if you, the coaching side of things is really useful just to examine what's important to you in the job. So seek some coaching, whether it's the group coaching that I did or having one or two independent sessions. So perhaps that would be my advice.
So just to circle back on what Liz just said, so VSGD in partnership with VDS Training do a group career coaching cohort 2 times a year. Our next cohort is due in January 2024. If you're interested, then email group career coaching in the header to hello@vsgd.co and we can give you the information. Mel will put that into the chat box for you as well in a second.
And excellent. I promise this wasn't even rehearsed. We didn't even mention this before. This is an honest piece of advice from experience.
There you go. Get some career coaching if you're not sure. Group or one-to-one, we do both flavors, and we do that in North America as well. Right, let's have another question. So, Kat, for you, can you request a preferred location, or are there specific areas where these jobs exist?
So no, in the short, is there specific areas? So within England, it's split into sort of 3 regions: the north, south, and the west. And within that, we then split into smaller teams that covers more specific geographical areas. So so yes, roles are local, but no, they exist geographically across the entire country, including Scotland and Wales. Sean might have to correct me here on how the adverts work these days, because it did used to be that you applied for a role in a specific location, and then how I applied was that I actually applied for a job in Shropshire, living in North Yorkshire, knowing that if I passed the interview, I basically sat on a reserve list, and then when a job came up in North Yorkshire, I was then offered that list. So, but I think that might have changed slightly in terms of the roles being offered to specific areas, I think.
Well, there's still continuity in that regard, in that we still cite them as the office location. So APHA have office locations from which our SVIs in this example operate. So it's their office to where they'll go and collect their kit, and there are desks there that they can work from. Post-COVID, that we've got this principle as government do of hybrid working, so a proportion can be done at home. Then you've got your visits at office, and I certainly encourage our vets earlier in their career to spend as much time as they can in the office. But what I would say is, and maybe following on from the previous question, is don't be deterred by an application. If you think it's the type of job, particularly from what Liz and Kat have said tonight, apply, because until you're in it, until you're doing it, and then you're getting all that training and support and learning on the job. The adverts, I've found this time, it's very difficult to bring them to life in the adverts. But in terms of, if you see an office and you think, oh, that's probably too far away, I live half an hour away, then definitely apply, because half an hour away isn't a reason not to apply. Not like clinical practice where, being half an hour away might be difficult at times, or maybe further away. So if you're thinking, actually, the Cardiff office, I live in Newport or Swansea, and it's 45 minutes away, the work will be in the area surrounding, of which you can pick up. So there's the opportunity to go to the office every now and then, do some of those farms in the surrounding area, and then maybe do some of that paperwork at home. So there's that sort of hybrid approach.
Great. couple more questions, and then we'll draw it to a close and we'll stop the stream. Questions from overseas. So, do you sponsor visas? Do people have to be MRCBS eligible? And final part was, is there any crossover between UK and US? Because it sounds like we have a US-based person here asking about a job in the UK.
So I'll take the middle question because that's the easiest. Yes, you have to be a member of the Royal College in order to be successful. It doesn't prevent, actually, in the whole process, you have to tick yes in order to go further. So membership of the Royal College is a prerequisite, or a fellow. Yes, we do visa sponsorship, and we have a small number of individuals that we're just running through that at the moment through a campaign. So what I would say, rather than spending too long going through the detail, we will have a campaign active with VSGD and on the civil service jobs live very, very shortly. And there are details on there, minimum criteria, etc. So please look at that. So that's a yes, subject to your criteria. As to the North America, it would once again come down to whether you're a member of the Royal College. And that will be the eligibility in that regard.
Okay. 2 last questions then. Can you see practice with one of the teams to get a flavour of the work? Liz, I'll put that to you.
I'm not. I think the answer is yes, sort of. I'm not quite sure the exact rules. We certainly have vet students, and I did see practice during my PhD now. And as a vet customer, you can come and see your PM. So I think if the answer is probably yes to that. But I don't know the exact details.
I'll come in quickly there. So
yeah.
You mentioned EMS. There's a formal application process. If you're a graduate already, we don't advertise it, but I wouldn't want to deter anybody. So I'm happy to have my details shared, Adrian, at the end, and then I can look at legitimate opportunities. And I'm sure the likes of Liz and Kat, and there'll be plenty of other colleagues akin who would say, yeah, on this week, I'm sure we can have someone come along for a day or two and have a look around. And
they're also really helpful to have. It's just an extra pair of hands. It's
extra pair of hands on a busy day.
We put them to work.
And then, so we will wrap up after this final question. So this one is going to Kat. Do government vets miss the fast pace and commercial nature of private practice?
That's a good question. There are times I'm thinking of getting my own sheep just so I can lamb some sheep, to be honest. No, there are times when you do miss it a little bit. However, I was out yesterday, it was sleeting down with rain, it was freezing cold, and I was thinking back to how I would have been stood somewhere TB testing. So if I'm perfectly honest, no, I don't really miss it. There are elements that you do, but I think this job more than makes up for it in many other ways. And, I think, you keep in touch with the clinical side enough, and there are times when this job is equally as fast paced. Once you have the confirmed premises with some form of notifiable disease, it's not stopping until it's sorted out. So you can imagine what the last 2 years have looked like for my colleagues and I, and with Liz and her teams as well. So if it's fast paced, that's not necessarily something you're not going to get. But the specifics of clinical practice, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but no, not in the long term.
Well, look, we have been nattering for 45 minutes now. Hopefully we've answered a whole bunch of questions about what a transition into a civil service APHA job looks like. There is actually a government vet website where you can see a load of blogs and see a load of information. And as Sean has said, we're going to be running a APHA recruitment campaign in the next few weeks. So do check back on vsgd.co, and on the top nav, find the jobs page. What we're going to do now is just quickly flash up the QR code for the London Vet Show. If you are coming to the London Vet Show, give this QR code a quick scan. It'll take you to the London Vet Show page, and that page has got all of the information on it to the things that VSGD is doing. We are really pleased to be partnered with Summit Veterinary Pharmaceuticals. The UK Commercial Director, Rachel Bell, is a friend of mine. And next week, we'll be doing transitions into industry with Rachel, who's a vet, and with one of her team, Jo Brett, who's a qualified vet nurse and has transitioned into industry as well. So that's the segue into next week. So just on behalf of everybody here, I just want to say a massive thank you to Liz to Catherine and to Sean. And what we're going to do is wave bye-bye to the Facebook crew.